First, we're going to discuss buses because the number of local bus routes in England have halved since 2011, according to research by the Labour Party. The West Midlands is one of the worst hit regions, and the research is based on figures published in annual reports by traffic commissioners, which show that more than 2,000 routes have been cut in England since 2021 alone. So this is basically research since 2011, but that actually it's ramped up a bit in recent years as well. National Express West Midlands say the figures are inclusive of the West Midlands in the broadest sense, so the wider West Midlands region, and the operational area of its service right here in metropolitan West Midlands has largely retained its network. Let's talk now to Graham Vidler. In fact, I spoke to him a little bit before I came on air. You can hear from him now, Chief Executive of the Confederation of Passenger Transport, which is a trade association representing the bus and coach sector.
So the figures that the Labour Party have published this morning are based on what's called registered bus routes. Now that's an imprecise science, and the people who registered the bus routes themselves can see that there was a lot of double counting before 2019. So, for example, a bus service that went from Staffordshire into metropolitan West Midlands would have been counted twice, once in each area. So figures were overstated in the past, and that's partly contributed to the decline which has been reported.
Okay, so it's not quite as harsh as it sounds when they say the number of bus routes has halved. That's not actually accurate.
So the number of registrations recorded in the statistics has halved, but that doesn't really reflect the passenger experience. Just about everybody focuses instead on a measure of bus mileage. So that's the total number of miles that buses run each year. If you look at the decline in mileage, then in the wider West Midlands over the last decade or so, it's been about a quarter, 25%, which is not the worst in the country. I don't want to stoke up any Midlands rivalry, but the East Midlands has had a slightly larger rate of decline, for example. And within the West Midlands, it's important to recognise that it varies widely from area to area. So in the metropolitan West Midlands, Birmingham, Coventry, Solihull, Wolverhampton, etc., the decline's been less than 20%. It's been much higher than that in places like Herefordshire, Worcestershire and Warwickshire. Nationally, that's fallen by 19% over the same period. So it's still a decline, but nowhere near that 50% figure.
It's still quite a big decline, though, isn't it? A fifth. Really, and it's something that we do get listeners talking about quite frequently, that it's just a little creep here and there in parts of our, well, both urban and more rural areas of the West Midlands.
Yes, I think that's right. And it's a decline that we'd very much like to see reversed, and we're doing everything we can at the moment to minimise. It's come in two stages, really, over the last decade or so. So before the pandemic, most of the impact came from local authorities reducing the amount they spent on local bus services, and that accounts for most of the change. There's also been some change since the pandemic, of course, as people's travel habits have changed, and some services which were previously commercially viable are now not. So if you put those two things together, there has been some decline over the last decade, about 19% in total mileage, as I say.
Is that sort of the natural way things are going, or should it be the other way round? Because they're talking about reducing car reliance and car journeys frequently. And obviously we know a lot of people rely on buses. They don't have vehicles, and, you know, it's maybe a more economic way of travelling. Is this a trend, basically? Is this going to keep going? So we are in a position where they've halved in a few years' time?
So it's not a natural thing at all, and it's very much a reversible trend, and reversing it is important not just for the people who currently depend on buses, but for all of us, because we all benefit when someone else gets on a bus, in reduce congestion, reduce pollution, and so on and so forth. The key really is the amount of funding available for bus services. Nationally, that's fallen in real terms by 7% over the last decade. And that's really not helped passengers get the services they need. There has been more investment going into some parts of the country over the last year or so through something called the National Bus Strategy, and many areas in the West Midlands have benefited from that. Going forward, we need to see more of that sort of expenditure, particularly invested in things like bus priority, so buses can go a little bit quicker, be a little bit more reliable, become cheaper to operate and more attractive to passengers to use, and then we can reverse that trend.
So it needs a political will and money, is what you're saying?
It needs the political will, and what in the grand scheme of government spending and government spending on transport is a relatively little bit of investment to reverse that trend.
That is Graham Vidler, Chief Exec of the Confederation of Passenger Transport. Now, they